workers in New Zealand are facing growing safety risks. In this episode, we're going to unpack the challenges and explore essential training like de-escalation and conflict management, and share some practical tips to help retailers build safer, more resilient teams. Kia ora, I'm Carolyn Young, Chief Executive of Retail NZ. Today I'm joined by Scott Harris, who's the Managing Director with Workforce Resilience. Welcome, Scott.
Kia ora. How are you, Carolyn?
I'm very good. It's just great to be getting into this really tricky topic, right? It's a really complex area in terms of resilience and staff training. But I
Right.
wondered if we could start off with you painting a picture of the current safety and security landscape in retail in New Zealand. And, what are some of the key challenges that retailers are facing today?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question to start off with. And I think that really no one in New Zealand, in so far as retail, I guess in workplaces, is immune to violence and aggression and conflict in the workplace at the moment, and particularly when it relates to crime. Probably what I like to think about is that, your crime and your violence is really interrelated, isn't it? So about 80% of the violence that's committed against retail team members is during theft intervention. So that's obviously a big piece. But the part that I probably think paints the best picture is your own statistics from your report in 2024, which talks about, 99% of the people that responded to that great survey talked about how they've been impacted by violence or aggression or some form of theft or crime. And a lot of people talk about theft as shoplifting, but I think that underplays it, doesn't it, Carol? And I think, crime is really important.
Look, it's a really challenging space. And I think when we think about crime and we think about the violence that aligns with that, training's evolved, as crime's evolved. I know that training's evolved over the years, things like
Mhm.
de-escalation and conflict management, responses to armed robberies, those sorts of things have evolved. What does that look like now?
Well, we're very lucky to have been operating for 10 years in this industry. And one of our first clients, I guess, were Kathmandu, who are one of the big retailers around the world and certainly in this region. Um, Training started with most organizations like Kathmandu or some of the other organizations that we currently work with. It started with more e-learning and rather than face to face. And I don't think at the time, and this is probably going back before COVID, I don't think that people really recognized how impactful it was, and then probably thinking about COVID, how much things escalated during COVID and
Mm.
post-COVID. I think if you're thinking around what some of the causes or the causal factors are.
So when you look at, the training that Workforce Resilience offers, how are they designed to support the frontline retail staff that are seeing that violence and aggressive behaviour in store on a regular basis?
Yeah, well, I think again, whilst we help organizations with e-learning and pre-learn and other ways of sharing that message, it's really around helping to build that muscle memory for teams in how to deal with those violent or difficult or periods or times of conflict when they're in their workplace.
Mm.
And so we work with organizations through that face-to-face environment and talk about things like how to communicate more effectively when dealing with those difficult people. Um, because even though most of the time it's the theft intervention that causes that violence or aggression, it can also be a difficult conversation around a refund, or it can be people that are waiting. And so a lot of it comes back to that conversation piece as well. So we focus on what we call a de-escalation ladder or conflict communications ladder, and that really helps step people through the process of going from a difficult conversation to improving it and hopefully either de-escalating or rather knowing when to stop talking and then creating distance. And I think that's really important because our team are so good at customer service, but sometimes they're a little too good and they keep talking.
Mm. Look, and those visual cues and being aware of those things are really critically important to make sure staff are safe. And
Hmm.
so, as you say, it's really important to know when to engage and how to do that, and sometimes when just to step back and make sure that your safety is paramount. Because we
Well,
know from all of the retailers we work with that they're worried about staff safety as the first and most important thing.
well, 100%. And in on that, really situational awareness is so important, and recognizing when someone is becoming aggressive or when a situation is escalating, because the quicker you can recognize, that point of escalation or a situation that's becoming unsafe, the quicker you can change your trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it's about the minute you see them approaching the store, it's not, they don't necessarily have to have got in the store. So
Mhm.
that awareness of your surroundings is really important. But when
Yeah.
we're thinking about training, so what are some of the common gaps and misconceptions that retailers might have when they're thinking about preparing their staff and training their staff for high stress and high risk
Mm,
situations
mm,
where
mm.
you might be in
Yeah.
trying to have a conversation with someone that is offending in your store?
Well, I think one of the key problems can be that organizations might just focus on, I guess, some induction training or some e-learning. And e-learning is really great, but it needs to be supported either through enhancement of the e-learning so it's interesting and people actually take the time to do it, because
Mm.
half the time it's like the pig from Toy Story that's sitting there just racing through, hitting
Yes.
the button to fast forward, and that's what our teams are doing. So I guess the key really is around making sure the team are taking it in, because it's all around muscle memory. And I was a police officer for 26 years, and we were really lucky because we were supported by a lot of training. We were supported by a lot of tools, and we probably had the one thing that it was important for us, which was that power of arrest, which let us end that situation. So that through trained professionals, police
Yeah.
officers that are dealing with that. So that's something that was really effective for me, and doing it regularly and building that muscle memory. But unfortunately, people in the retail sector, they don't get a lot of training and they don't learn how to communicate. And then when the situation escalates, sometimes they can be reaching for the right approach or the right words to use, or again, back to that really important piece, which is, creating distance at the right
Mm.
time. Because at the end of the day, Carolyn, you see it all the time because you're working with so many retailers, but it's when we're too close that we're being harmed. That's when those assaults are occurring.
Yeah, which are really, really unsettling for everyone. And I think what we do know is that just because you've learned something doesn't mean to say that when you go to put it in action the first time or the second time, that you'll get it right. So that
Yeah.
ongoing learning and repetitiveness of just continuing to learn and practice and doing training in a safe environment with your staff is really important so that when something occurs, they've got the right tools in their toolbox to pull
Uh-huh.
out. So
Yeah,
yeah,
muscle memory, and
yeah.
and that's why you and the rest of New Zealand is so good at rugby. I guess you just it's something that you is prolifically practiced, and it goes for reason. The more we practice something, the greater we'll be when we're actually under pressure. And that I guess that's back to your question. That's something that I guess a lot of organisations do, but not so much retailers in developing their teams.
Yeah. If we think a little bit about practical tips or best practices, what would you recommend retailers are looking to build more resilient and safety conscious sort of workplace culture?
Well, I love that term culture, because we just had a meeting with Woolworths today, and we were really talking about how over the last 4 years we've been changing that culture within that organization, and it's a culture of one of the key things we talk about is empathy, respect, and kindness, and that's something that we weave right throughout our training and through the communication strategy that we would use. So. Um, I think it really needs to focus on getting the best outcomes through that communication piece and through being safe. And I guess that safety culture is really important as well, because we can a lot of the retailers we work with, there is a big focus on loss, and there's a big and like I'm sure you're like me, no
Mm.
one likes to see something walk out of the store, and everyone hates to see theft. But we hate to see our team get harmed even more. And I notice when we see posts from organisations across in New Zealand, we spend a lot of time there. We got Nicole, who's based in Christchurch, but when we're reviewing all of these things, sometimes, there's more focus on the loss of an item and the repercussions there rather than making sure our team go home safe. And we have these non-negotiables we talk about. And those non-negotiables are you win when they leave, which is really important. So, by that I mean the longer we perpetuate the time and offenders in our store or retail environment, the longer the more chance there is of it escalating. So once they've left the store, and it might be an armed robbery, which can be really, really scary. And I see just in Auckland over the last few days, there's been some really significant armed robberies as well. But, we don't want to go down the path of trying to stop these people from leaving. We really want to let them leave so that we can go home safely to our family. And that should be the priority of every single employer in that retail space, that they want their team to be safe. Of course, we need to do things in the deterrent space and loss prevention space. Look, I 100% agree with that, but we also really need to take that full focus of, the risk to our people far outweighs the risk to our property.
Absolutely. Look, that's amazing feedback for us to think about. And thank you so much for joining us today, Scott. And it's been such a pleasure to speak with you and hear how Workforce Resilience is supporting retailers to keep their staff safe.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you.
I hope everyone enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to visit Workforce Resilience at www.workforceresilience.co.nz to find out more. This episode today was part of our Empowering Retail series, your go-to resource for short, actionable insights designed to take your retail business to the next level. Watch out for other episodes and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, ka kite anō. Bye for now.